creative friends, welcome to Kelly Does Stuff. Today I'm going to show you how to create cobblestone roads out of styrofoam. If you've seen my other videos, you know that I will use this a lot in my Halloween village display. And it's now November and a lot of us are probably thinking about preparing, creating, maybe even setting up for our Christmas village. So I did two different types. I did one using a pen or pencil and then one using a hot wire tool, if you have that. And so I'll show you as I do it. I just kind of switch back and forth. The method is the same for both of them. It's just the tool that you use is different. So if you are thinking about getting a tool and don't have one, or you definitely don't want one, don't worry, you don't need one. You can create it. I use pen and pencil probably the majority of the time. Now, a couple things to just think about when you're creating your cobblestone roads. Today what I'm going to do is just show you sections of roads. And if you've looked at like Department 56, you know that you can buy sections and then you just set them up. You can get a curved section. And so the benefit of doing it this way, creating a bunch of different sections, is of course you get to decide. You can change it around from year to year where they go. You can also carve directly into the styrofoam platform, so it's at the same level. Like if you were to have maybe some grass or whatever the rest of the ground situation, whatever else is going on the ground, it's all going to be even. If you set this on top of your styrofoam, it's raised a little bit. For Halloween, I pretty much carve everything directly into my styrofoam. I really like that look. So it's a little bit more integrated. I don't want to say downside, but just the thing to think about if you're doing that is you might be a little bit more long-term committed. So if you created a pathway or a road that directly led up to a cottage or a store, and you had all these different, paths that led to your buildings or however you wanted to do it, you're kind of committed to setting it up that way year to year. Now, of course, you could do lots of things. You could put snow on top. You could do other things to change the pattern. But it always feels to me like if I'm going to do this path, it's because I want from year to year to put that house there. With Christmas, I like to kind of change things up a little bit. So I don't carve into my styrofoam. And in fact, typically we'll use a Department 56 roads. I really like the idea this year. I think I'm gonna probably create a lot more of these because I like to have a lot more road, but it just adds up a lot when I'm purchasing Department 56. So I'm probably gonna create a lot more of these. And I had an idea too, because I like that more integrated look where the road isn't kind of sitting above the ground type of thing. So you could do something where you have like a snowbank coming up. I hope you can see this, like a, type of thing. I think there are things that you could do to have it be a little bit more integrated. It does get a little bit of a challenge, again, if you do it like this, because maybe you set the house up here and maybe you've created some curved sections and now you gotta move the house to fit the curve. Anyway, lots of, we could talk forever about how we're gonna design it and set it up, but today is about creating cobblestone road. So let's go ahead and start creating.
All right, for this project, I'm going with that XPS foam that I get at Home Depot. Typically when I'm creating something like this, I'm digging into my scrap bin, but if you're buying this foam for the first time, here is what it looks like. It's 2 foot by 2 foot by 1 inch. And it's $6.97 at Home Depot. There are other brands of this. You could get at Lowe's or get online. I always find it cheapest at Home Depot, so that is where I get it. So for the width of your cobblestone road, it's really going to be a personal preference. I ended up somewhere between 2.5 and 2.75 inches. One thing you'll want to keep in mind if you're planning to put any of your figurines on the road, measure those figurines or get an idea. You can look up sizes online to see the width of those to make sure that your figurines will fit on your finished cobblestone road. I'm using a box cutter to cut out the section of my cobblestone road, and of course you could certainly use your hot wire tool if you have that. So this styrofoam being 1 inch thick is just a little bit too thick for me for what I like my cobblestone road to be. So I am going to use a hot wire table to thin it out. I purchased this table last year. I just started doing enough projects that it made sense for me to purchase this. You could definitely try to do this with a hot wire tool. You could purchase thinner sheets of styrofoam to start with, or you could try to use a blade. When you have bigger sections, it does get tricky. It's hard to manage. It's hard to be consistent in maintaining that size the whole way through. So if you wanted to use the blade, I would probably go in really small sections of styrofoam and then piece them all together. All right, let's start creating cobblestone. For the first technique, we're going to use that engraving tool from Hotwire Foam Factory. There's nothing real special or scientific about this. You just start drawing out the cobblestone in whatever shapes and sizes that you want. Just remember that it is a hot wire tool, so it's hot. Be careful. And also remember that with it being hot, if you leave it on your styrofoam, it's just going to continue to eat through it. You can decide how deep you want those grooves of each of your individual cobblestones to be based on the pressure that you apply when using the tool. And of course, when working with hot wire tools, make sure that you work in a well-ventilated area. Definitely do your research on the type of tools that are compatible with the different types of materials. Always be safe and take care of yourself. Okay, there's our finished section of road, and now let's go on to the technique using a dull pen or pencil. The great thing about XPS foam, probably heard me talk about it many times, is that it takes the impression of what you put on it. So this really isn't a carving process. You are just pressing into the foam and it is taking that impression similar to how you carved in those ridges with the hot wire tool. If you use a pen, you don't want anything that's really sharp. It's just more of a rounded, soft point of the pen. And this process really isn't even about seeing the cobblestone. You don't need to do this in any particular color because you're going to paint over all of this. Although I will say, depending on the paint color that you choose, sometimes I've used bright pens or things to draw on and it will come through in that paint. So I typically will use a pencil that you are not going to see when you paint over it, or a dark pen knowing that I'm going to put dark color on top of it. Before we move on to painting, we want to add some texture to our cobblestone. You can use a rolled up piece of aluminum foil for this, or a rock that has a lot of bumps and ridges. I use a rock just because I can use it over and over again for different projects. And you can see here that you're just going to roll it over the styrofoam. You can kind of press into it a little bit. This is just going to give it a lot of texture to help a lot of that detail come through and give it some good dimensions when we paint it. To paint your cobblestone, start with a base coat of the darkest color of whatever you want your finished cobblestone to look like. My cobblestone are going to be brown, so I'm starting with a really dark brown color, mixing together just brown and black paint. I'm getting a lot of paint on my brush. I'm using a thick brush here to cover a lot of area quickly. And very importantly, you want to make sure that you're painting into all of those little grooves in between the cobblestone. But if you look really closely here, you'll see that I have so much paint on my brush that instead of just painting inside the grooves, the paint is so thick that it's actually filling the space between those grooves, and I'm really just losing the groove detail there. The cobblestone all just blends together. To prevent that, I recommend painting like this, where you still get a lot of paint on your brush, but it is not so super saturated that it's going to fill in those gaps. You can see that I'm taking the tip of my brush and kind of smooshing it into the gaps after I've done that pass over the cobblestone. So there is not a lot of paint soaking the tip of the paintbrush. Another way that you could do this is grab a smaller paintbrush that just has a kind of a fine round tip and paint inside those gaps. So you're painting the gaps, you just don't want to fill the gaps with paint. You're going to lose detail if you do that. And here's an example of what I'm talking about when it's dry. You can kind of see in that center area, I just lost my detail. And here we have our two finished pieces. This one is the one that I did pen and pencil. It's a little bit light in some spots, so I'm gonna go over it again with that dark color. And then the one that I did with the hot wire tool, I can see a little bit of pink coming through in the gaps, so I'll go over that a little bit before we move on to our dry brushing. So I've talked a lot about dry brushing in several of my videos, but this is the process of really adding the detail to whatever piece that you're doing. So I'm going to start with a bit of a heavier dry brush. In general, for dry brushing, you want a very dry brush, number one, and you're not going to put a lot of paint on that brush. You're not going to saturate it like we did that first layer. You're gonna start picking up a little bit more of the details. Now, because I want to just lighten up a bit the cobblestone, I do a heavier dry brush for this coat. So the cobblestones themselves are pretty covered in that lighter brown, but I'm not putting enough paint on the brush that I'm getting into those grooves. Once that layer is completely dry, we're moving on to the next layer of our dry brushing technique. Now, something that I see other people do when it comes to cobblestone is start to pick out individual pieces of cobblestone and paint them a different color. Maybe some grays or tans or browns or greens. Anytime I try to do that, it never looks good. I've seen other people do it, looks great. I just don't have that technique down. I never like it. So what I do to try to get a little bit more difference in the cobblestones is, as I'm dry brushing, instead of painting that entire piece of cobblestone section there one color, I'll pick little sections. So a little section in the middle will have a little bit of this lighter color, maybe up in the corner, I'll leave a little bit of it darker. That's just my method for getting a little bit different dimensions, since I don't have a really good handle on painting individual pieces different colors. And just remember, as you do this, you're going to want an even drier and drier brush as you add more layers. So you'll see there that I'll dip the paint in the brush and then I'll wipe a lot of it off on that cardboard there. You can always go back and add more paint. It does get hard to take it away. And we're going quickly over the top of the cobblestones because this is when that detail is going to come through from all that texturing that we did with our rock or aluminum foil. So dry brush, and then quickly swooshing, that's the official term, swooshing over the cobblestone. Here we can compare our two different techniques. This is with the hot wire tool, and then this was with our pen. And just in case you're curious about painting things individually, this is what I see people do for cobblestone and bricks, and it comes out really beautifully. I don't do it well, but this is something that you could do. This is what I'm talking about. Just pick out some different colors and paint individual cobblestones. It can look really cool, but not for me. For my final dry brushing pass, I'm going to do just a plain white. And this acts almost as an outline of the cobblestone. I'm doing just the smallest bit of paint on my brush, wiping most of it off and going very lightly over the cobblestone. And having this light, bright white is a great way to accentuate the difference between the darkest areas and now your lightest areas. Now, if you were going to put this in a space that you wanted it to be really covered with snow, if you wanted to, you could do certain sections that had a lot more white. Remember, it's your project. You can have these cobblestone look any way you want. I actually have an idea coming up for some peppermint cobblestone, so I'll do those. If this was going to be in sort of a North Pole or a Grinch village, you can do your cobblestones any fun colors that you want. And time for the big reveal. Let's see what our cobblestone roads look like. Here's the cobblestone we created using our hot wire tool. And here's the cobblestone we created using pen. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Please let me know of any other tutorials you'd like to see. I've got a lot of ideas coming up for Christmas. I hope that you will consider subscribing to my channel, liking this video, and sharing it with 5 or 10 creative friends. I look forward to seeing you next time.